Julius Caesar, Abraham Lincoln, Franz Ferdinand, John F. Kennedy, all assassinated, all with the intention of sending a message. But there's another name from Canada that doesn't get discussed nearly as much. That name, Thomas D'Arcy McGee. Once a young, optimistic Irish revolutionary, turned Father of Confederation. Gunned down in 1868 on a quiet Ottawa street. His accused would be dragged to the Ottawa County Jail, and after a trial, he would be executed in front of 5,000 people. But some say when that trapdoor opened on the gallows beneath his feet, while his physical body may have left the world, his spirit did not. And if you stick around until the end of tonight's video, I'll tell you exactly how you can experience this haunting firsthand for yourself. Let me paint you a picture. In the mid-1800s, Europe was a powder keg ready to explode. Tensions were at an all-time high. You see, in France, crowds toppled a monarchy. In Italy and Hungary, nationalist movements were shaking ancient empires to their core. In Berlin and Vienna, students and workers were fighting for their constitutional rights. This was called the Springtime of Nations. The idea that people could rule and govern themselves was gaining traction, and it was spreading like wildfire. Now, most of these revolts would be crushed pretty quickly. But it wouldn't be long before one spark from that wildfire made its way to a small famine-stricken island off the coast of Great Britain. In Ireland, a movement of young radicals, poets, dreamers, journalists, they believed that they could break free from the British rule, and they called themselves Young Ireland. Ireland in the 1840s was not a good place to be. The Great Famine claimed 1 million lives. Another 1 million people had fled the country. The potato, a staple crop for millions across Ireland, was rotting in the ground. And the livestock and the crops that the Irish people were able to raise were being exported for the gain of the British Empire. Imagine working all season long just to have the food that you've raised and grown taken off of the plates of your family and shipped away overseas. The Irish people started to take this personally. The anger bubbled. They started talking. And then they started yelling. And it got to the point that the Irish people didn't just want their food, nor did they want charity, but they wanted their freedom, whatever the cost. And from that, the Young Ireland movement was born. People who believed that culture and identity could inspire revolution, that words could be weaponized. Among them was a 23-year-old, sharp-witted, ambitious journalist named Thomas D'Arcy McGee. He wrote with fury. He spoke with passion. And in 1848, when revolutions were happening all over Europe, Young Ireland decided that it was their turn. This was the moment that Ireland was going to rise up, and McGee was going to be right at the heart of it. In 1848, Young Ireland called upon the people of Ireland. This was their moment. They would rebel, they would fight against the British soldiers, and drive them out of the country once and for all. There was just one problem. The Irish people were thin in numbers. 1 million dead, 1 million fled. And the ones who were there were tired. They were hungry. They were stricken with disease. And all that was a recipe for failure. The Irish people met the British soldiers at a farmhouse. And unfortunately, the rebellion was over almost as quickly as it started. It didn't end with freedom or revolution. Instead, it ended with exiles, executions, and arrests. Now, Thomas D'Arcy McGee, well, that was a turning point for him in his life, because he went now from being a poet of fire, a dreamer of independence, to a fugitive on the run. Now, he disguised himself and he got on a boat across the Atlantic over to the United States. Some people might say that was the original Irish goodbye. And that's where the next chapter of this story begins. Because once McGee arrived in the United States, he didn't find the shining republic that he had once dreamed of. He found a country ripping itself in two. So McGee landed in the United States in 1848, and he was ready to keep fighting for the Irish cause against the British overlords, all from the safety of American soil. And that's exactly what he did when he got there. Through his journalism, through his words, he rallied people to his cause. But the longer that he stayed, the quicker he realized, if this is what unchecked democracy looks like, this is not what the Irish people need. You see, McGee, he was a dreamer of independence, and he thought the United States was the perfect model, something that he would be able to replicate back in Ireland. But the 1850s was not a great time for the United States. You see, the country was divided down the middle, slavers versus abolitionists, and even the Irish immigrants were drinking too much, fighting amongst each other. Picture the movie Gangs of New York. People killing, fighting, brawling in the streets. No morals, no compass, just drifting. It was at that point that McGee decided, this is not what the Irish people need. We need stability. We need education. We need morality. We need religion. We need a chance to rise up through society instead of burning it down. And McGee saw something in the north so bright that he could not look away. Canada. Yeah, it was still a British colony, but they were experimenting with self-governance. And although he despised the British, he loved his people more, and he thought that this may represent an opportunity to give his people something that America could not: peace without bloodshed. And so the idea of a revolution went out the window, and Thomas D'Arcy McGee headed to Canada. By the late 1850s, McGee had settled in Montreal, and this was the perfect city for him. It was ripe with Irish immigrants, many of whom were coming off of the famine, and they didn't really have a voice for themselves. So through his speeches, through his articles, McGee became a representative of the Irish people in Canada. In 1858, 10 years after his failed revolution, he was elected to the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Canada. And shortly thereafter, he would go on to become one of the Fathers of Confederation. He lobbied for new schools, railroads, a new identity for Canada. Not a violent republic like what he saw in the United States, something in between. Yes, still technically under the rule of the crown, but a place that governed itself. As his influence grew, so did his enemies. You see, the Fenian Brotherhood were an Irish militia. They operated out of the United States and would frequently launch attacks on Canada as a way to attack the crown. McGee did not like this, and he made it very clear when he gave a speech at Parliament denouncing the Fenian Brotherhood, calling them reckless, traitors, cowards. And for them to hear one of their former brothers say this, well, that was unforgivable. To them, McGee was not just another politician. He was once their brother, and now he was a turncoat. And when he made that speech, he may as well have signed his own death certificate, April 7th, 1868. Thomas D'Arcy McGee was involved in a debate that ran late and was just headed back from Parliament to his boarding house on Spark Street. You can imagine at that time, the streets were quiet. There was a low fog over the road, and not a person in sight. When Thomas D'Arcy McGee went to enter his boarding house, he went to go put the key in the door, and the sound of silence was broken with a gunshot. He was shot in the back of his neck and died instantly. Didn't even have a chance to turn and face his killer. This shocked the whole country. You see, Canada was only 1 year old, not even at this point, and already one of its founding fathers was gunned down in the street. Within hours of Thomas D'Arcy McGee being gunned down on his doorstep, police had their suspect in cuffs, a 28-year-old tailor named Patrick James Whelan. Now, at the time that Whelan was arrested, the police did find a revolver in his pocket. But it can be claimed that that evidence is circumstantial at best. The gun was never officially connected to the murder, nor did anybody see him shoot it. But here's the thing. Whelan was a known sympathizer of the Fenian Brotherhood, and so therefore the gun, the motive, that was everything that the jury, that the people of Ottawa and the people of Canada needed to pin this on him. Whether or not he was truly the murderer or this was just an effort to get a scapegoat to serve justice, well, no one really knows for sure. Whelan's trial became a public spectacle. The prosecution painted him as the Fenian assassin and the man who silenced a father of Confederation. The defense argued that this was just a scapegoat and that they were just looking for someone to blame, but the jury needed no convincing, and Whelan was found guilty. On February 11th, 1869, less than 1 year after the execution of Thomas D'Arcy McGee, Patrick Whelan was marched to the gallows, where 5,000 people were packed in the courtyard to watch him hang. Whelan maintained his innocence right up until the very last second. Patrick Whelan was marched into the courtyard to the gallows of the Carleton County Jail. A noose was placed around his neck, and his last words were, "May God bless you all, and God save Ireland." And then, with the pull of a lever, the trapdoor beneath his feet dropped. Today, if you walk down Spark Street, it feels calm. It's a pedestrian mall lined with cafes, government buildings, and small shops. In the summer, there are buskers and food vendors, and people stroll by without a second thought. But on this street, right outside a quiet boarding house, Canada's only federal political assassination took place, and most people have no idea. And just a few blocks away stands another relic from this case, the Carleton County Jail. Once home to some of Canada's most infamous criminals, now a hostel where travelers from around the world come to stay and possibly experience some of the many hauntings that have been reported there. Guests have reported footsteps in the hall when no one's there, random cold spots or chills, doors slamming, and even a man in early 19th century apparel roaming the halls right near the gallows. Many believe him to be Patrick Whelan, still protesting his innocence. Some even believe that it could be Thomas D'Arcy McGee searching for justice that was wrongly delivered. The Ottawa Jail Hostel doesn't hide its past. In fact, the gallows where Patrick Whelan was hung still stand today. And if you spend the night, you're just a thin wall away from where he took his last breath. So, if you haven't figured out, the Ottawa Jail is not just a backdrop for tonight's story. If you're interested, you can actually go stay there. I personally have taken the tour, and I actually have a real paranormal experience to report from that tour. If you're interested in hearing more about that, you can click this video right here. Thanks for watching. My name is Matt, and this is Strange Ordinary. If you've made it this far, please remember to like the video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next one.